Hi, I'm Stacy, a compulsive eater. I weigh and measure 3 meals a day off the gray sheet. I write those meals down. I commit them to my sponsor. I don't eat in between my meals no matter what. I eat what I commit no matter what. And abstinence is most important in my life today without exception. My abstinence date is July 1st, 2017. Very grateful to be here, especially on Halloween. I wrote to my sponsees today and told them that for me, it's just another Thursday. And the way that I look at that Halloween stuff is it's just not my food. And if it were money instead of food, I would know it's not mine and I wouldn't take it if it's not mine. So that's kind of how I look at it, as just money out there that doesn't belong to me. Anyway, I'll tell you what I used to be like. I was born and raised in a very loving home in Southern California. I had severe food allergies from the time I was, from 2 was when they were first recognized, when I had my first anaphylactic reaction to food. And so as soon as I could learn how to read, I was reading ingredients in food, and I was taking my special food with me to the birthday parties and other things because I was allergic to so many foods. So I was very hyper cognizant of what food was and that I was different when it came to food and that food could kill me. And that was from a very early age. Also in my home, I grew up with a loving mother who will say to this day that she's a compulsive eater. And she would go up and down, very small frame, up and down about 50 pounds on every diet under the sun. So I was raised with that as well. And it wasn't until my middle school years where I developed just insatiable cravings for food. And I was a typical weight at that time. I've actually gone up and down 30 pounds, other than 2 pregnancies, up and down 30 pounds my whole life until I started Food Fellowship, and from high school until my early 30s. And I'm 5'1", and so it makes a difference. I know it's not morbidly obese, but it definitely makes a difference. But when I was in middle school and I wasn't able to drive yet, I had these insatiable cravings for food. And I knew I could go to my dad and say, I need to get this food. And he could tell, I think, by my voice or the look in my eyes, that it's not something that I felt I had a choice whether or not to eat. I needed to have it. And he would go to the grocery store and pick up the stuff we don't eat. And typically it would be stuff that you'd have to bake. And I would cut it in half and eat it raw and throw the other half away and have a diet soft drink. It was always a diet soft drink, and eat that. And at that point, the craving would subside for a little while. Before I came into Gray Sheet, it didn't subside. Nothing could cure the craving. But back in middle school, that would last me a few days or maybe a week. And I think one of the reasons, I know I came out the chute a compulsive eater, but I also was diagnosed in my early 30s with diabetes. And they think I had diabetes well before I was diagnosed with diabetes. So I also had all this excess sugar floating around in my system, and I don't know if that also attributed to the cravings, I'm not sure. So when I was in high school, I remember we had a pass to go off campus for lunch, and I would always go to a fast food place, and I had a lot of friends, and they thought it was kind of funny because I was a typical weight, and I would order a main thing and then 3 side things and 3 desserts and a drink we don't drink and then a diet soda, and eat that. And I read much later, probably about 10 years ago, I looked at my high school yearbook and someone wrote, I can't remember when, Stacy wasn't eating or talking about food. I mean, that's how much people could recognize that I was just I was really crazy when it came to the food. And then also the first time I totaled a car out of 3 that I totaled a car because of food, I had 4 other girls in the car and I hit a car that hit a car because I was reaching down to get something that we don't eat. I didn't start any restricting until I was in college. So in college, I went away 2,288 miles away across the country for college. And it was the first time that I didn't feel like I needed to hide when it came to my food, because I was always hiding, especially from my mom, what I was eating. And I would go places and get my fix. And I would do these little negotiations with friends. They would want me to go to the fraternity parties with them, so I would, but then I would make sure that they would come with me to 7-Eleven afterwards, and I'd bring a spoon and get the cold stuff and sit down on the floor and eat it with the spoon straight from the container. And that would help to, this is what I know, it would help to relieve the constant food thoughts in my head. So I had constant food thoughts in my head that would only be relieved by getting that fix that wouldn't last very long. Also in college, I started, as I said, the restricting. And so I would binge on incredible quantities of food, and then I would restrict by not eating for long periods of time, exercising, chewing food, spitting it out, laxatives. Those were pretty much what I did then. When I entered law school, that's when I started the formal diets. And I did, I'm a lifetime member of Weight Watchers, South Beach, sorry about the dog in the background. Anything, all those diets that the diets where you just drink things, hypnosis, the good phentermine, phentermine, the good fen, those types of things to control my eating or my control my weight, actually. But no amount of food was ever enough for me. And even putting one thing in my mouth after I had restricted for so long, putting something in my mouth that we don't eat, I couldn't. It would just start the cravings, the insatiable cravings. Anyway, when I was about 30, it was my daughter's, actually, I think I was in my early 30s. It was my daughter's 7th birthday. And I had heard about Compulsive Eaters Anonymous, and I knew that I needed to do a program for food. And I had never been in any type of fellowship before, but I had told my therapist that I need to do something to control these food thoughts, and told him finally after 10 years what I was doing with food. And he mentioned that program. So I started that program, and what was interesting about that program for me, it worked until it didn't work, but I had a medical abstinence being diabetic. I thought I needed to eat 6 times a day. And I thought that I was special because I had to face my demons 6 times a day and everyone else was 3 times a day. And I had breakfast this morning, a weighted measured abstinent breakfast at 6 a.m. And I had my lunch at 12:45. And I didn't die, and I was just fine. So it was just an excuse. I was mostly abstinent for a 10-year period of time, give or take a week or a few days, but most of that 10-year period of time I was abstinent, and I worked the steps in that program. What happened in the last couple years of that program, I didn't pick up sugar and flour. It's been over 6 years since I've had that, but I would go out to eat a lot because I didn't need to weigh and measure when I was at a restaurant, and I would eat the grains that we don't eat in this program that were allowed on the other program. It turned out I would go to restaurants 7 days a week, many times a day, getting huge volumes of that breakfast stuff that we don't eat, that was an okay grain in the other program. And I realized, I knew intuitively for the last 2 years or so that the program was not working for me anymore. Thank you, Sarah. And a very good friend of mine was working Gray Sheet, and I thought, okay, why does she seem so serene? Because she was in CEA How before. And I kind of knew this was the solution, but I didn't want to believe it was a solution. And on July 1st, 2017, she took me to my first meeting, Gray Sheet meeting, and it was at the Grove. And I had never, I was still abstinent the way I was abstinent in CEA How. Started on July 1st, 2017, made the commitment that I would be entirely honest, no matter what. I would be honest, and I would treat myself as a total newcomer. I knew nothing about food. And that was really helpful. I also said to everyone, I'm only doing this for 90 days. If the benefits outweigh the risks after 90 days, maybe I'll continue, but don't invest in me because it's only going to be 90 days. And on the 90th day, I was sitting at the Grove in Los Angeles, and there was no place in the world that I would rather have been than in that chair at that moment. And there's been so many gifts of this program. First of all, not having those substances in my body that I'm allergic to that is key, and weighing and measuring is key. But it's the no matter what message, and it's the fellows in this program that's been everything to me. I have had a lot of no matter what's in this program. I actually write it down. I have a list, but to name a few, and there's been good and bad and little and big. My mom and dad divorced after 47 years, and my mom remarried. I had my son's bar mitzvah. My daughter graduated high school, went off to college. I've had surgery with hospitalization where I went into surgical menopause, and so had to deal with the whole hormone thing. My grandmother passed away. My sister-in-law died suddenly at 51. My dad passed away. And through it all, I was 100% present. And all I can say is the fact that I was present for the 2 years before my daughter went to high school, I was present for the last 2 years of my father's life, and I have been present it's hard to be present. It's hard for me to be present at times, but I don't feel like I'm pushing things down. I'm really feeling my feelings because I don't have anything really to mask those feelings. I try to stay abstinent today, but I've done an AWOL. I try to stay abstinent by just remaining in fit spiritual condition and praying and meditating as much as I can. I'm sponsored. I try to be of service. I do more than 7 meetings a week, Zoom meetings a week. I try to get the live meeting when I can. I've really connected with my fellows. You know, at my father's funeral and my sister-in-law's funeral, which were 8 days apart, I had Gray Sheeters there. I had Gray Sheeters up in Northern California come to my sister-in-law's funeral. The fellowship is there. And the fact that there's nothing in the world I could go through or will ever go through that someone hasn't been through abstinently is everything to me. And that no matter what message, I could not be more grateful for this program that's given me a life today. And I will stop there no matter what.